Good morning. It is Thursday, April the 30th, and I'm coming to you with the Wednesday, April 29th bell ringer answer. Your question dealt with von Thunen's model, and the idea here is to try to get you to apply some of the things that you know about von Thunen's model. So here's some of the elements that you need to consider. In von Thunen's model, the assumption, of course, is that all production is for local consumption, meaning the nearby city in the area in which the item was produced. Von Thunen's model also assumes that all land is flat, that transportation is either uniformly available or uniformly unavailable, that there are no barriers to transportation, that all farmers behave rationally, okay, that soil fertility is uniform. So you're asked about how certain examples of modern day agriculture would either validate or invalidate assumptions of von Thunen's model. Let's take dairy, and then let's kind of put fruit and vegetables together with them, because they were all lumped together in the same zone in von Thunen's model, where rent and transportation were driving how the land would be used. In the examples of dairy and fruits and vegetables, you have items that were traditionally produced right outside of the city for local consumption only. Now, we do see some elements of that today, this local consumption piece, when we look at things like the proliferation of farmers markets or the farm to table idea that's become popular in some restaurants, where restaurants want to advertise that they sell locally made items in season. They feature local products because they are better for the environment. They've been trucked around less. They support local businesses and help the local economy. That local element is key for von Thunen because there was only a local economy in his era. Now, what are some things that invalidate it? When you go to the grocery store and you buy yourself a gallon of Kroger brand milk or some other milk, or when you go to the grocery store and even in the middle of a pandemic, there are oranges and pineapples and watermelons, things that aren't in season, you're looking at non-local production in those elements. So those would be things that would invalidate those concepts. All right, extensive agriculture example is given as wheat. You could have used corn. It really didn't make any difference. I just needed to give you something that helped you understand we're talking about some sort of cereal crop. Okay, so these things in von Thunen's model would traditionally be done in the second farthest ring from the city. And if you look around the greater Cincinnati area, our large corn and soybean fields, they are in fact in those areas. Why? Because the land is flat, the soil has the appropriate fertility, the rent is cheaper than the rent would be in closer to the city. So all of those things fit with what we would see with von Thunen's model. Where do they invalidate them? The production that's done in and around Cincinnati is corn and soybeans, and the number one use for those things is now animal feed. Not in von Thunen's era, where the wheat was used primarily for bread for human consumption. So this animal feed idea means that that stuff is being loaded up and sent someplace else, wherever the animals happen to be. And we don't have a large livestock industry around here, so we're not using it to feed our own animals in this area. This is monocropping agriculture for commercial purposes only. This is very different than what von Thunen had been discussing. So that tends to invalidate what von Thunen was talking about. All right, then we've got the meat and poultry production. In von Thunen's model, this is on the far outside edge of the city because those animals can walk themselves to market, and they can therefore take advantage of the cheapest rent because they are their own form of transportation. One way that we see that von Thunen's model is still kind of holding true is that we are still not producing any animal products in areas that are near the market. Near the market was something that von Thunen stressed was not necessary for animals. They could be on the far outside edge of his model, although they were headed to the local city. We raise our cattle in places like Texas, our hogs in places like Iowa, our chickens in places like Iowa that aren't near any major cities, and that's because transportation can be overcome. But now this is where we get into the invalidated idea. Transportation is being overcome by new method. The chickens, pigs, and cows aren't walking themselves hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles to major American cities. They're being driven there in the back of semis or in rail cars, and that's usually being done as already converted meat products, not the whole live animal. Never talk about us shipping the whole live animal all across the United States. We ship the whole live animal only a few miles down the road to a slaughterhouse where it's converted. We ship the converted meat the longer distance. So, all right, so that should help refresh you a little bit on von Thunen's model. It has shown up disproportionately on the AP exam quite a lot. I'm not predicting that it will this year or anything, but you definitely need to make sure you're aware of and know von Thunen's model as a past land use. Do not forget that you have a Google meeting tomorrow, Friday, May the 1st at 1:15. I'm hoping that as many of you can make it as possible. I'm going to be going over how grades are going to work. I'm going to be talking about the AP exam and how that's going to function, making sure that we're as ready as we possibly can be for that. All right, stay safe and have a good Thursday.